Dear SoU, today I want to tell you about the arc of a Stories of Us workshop series. It's a very intentional journey that we take over the course of 7 workshops, and I want to give you a window into how it all flows. We start our first workshop with an exercise that helps us understand the overall arc of our lives and all the stories that it holds. We invite participants to draw their lives as rivers. The ups and the downs, the twists and the turns, the floods, the freezes, and the waterfalls. The metaphor of a river seems to resonate across cultures, and it's easy to explain why no 2 rivers, and therefore no 2 lives, are the same. We invite participants to start the river whenever they'd like, given that there may be life experiences or periods that they may prefer not to remember. And once they've drawn the arc of their rivers, we ask them to populate key life moments or events along the riverbanks. In documenting and sharing these life events through the metaphor of a river, our hope is to encourage participants to think of their whole lives as potential material for storytelling in the workshops that follow. In our second workshop, we focus on life before immigration. We encourage participants to travel back in time and share stories of their childhood inspirations and role models. Who influenced their early education and early work experiences back home? What were some impactful work experiences or successful career moments that they had back home? We define work broadly to include both formal and informal, paid and unpaid work. We spend time on this part of their lives for several reasons. Firstly, the Canadian labor market, for the most part, invalidates most of the certifications and work experiences that newcomers bring from their home countries. Whether they're a trained surgeon or an accredited engineer, if they don't have Canadian experience, they aren't considered for very many jobs here. In this workshop, we want participants to feel that the experiences they bring are worthy and add value. Secondly, many newcomers have to make a significant career change, either in pay, position, or field of work, in order to find employment in Canada. This can be a really disorienting process, and we have found that inviting stories about their early life inspirations often connects them to passions that are core to who they are and have shown up in different ways over the course of their lives. In unlocking the thread of passion that connects all of their experiences, participants often leave surprised by how the crux of who they are and what they enjoy hasn't shifted much over the course of their lives. The third workshop marks the midpoint of the journey, and it tends to be our heaviest one. In this workshop, we name the expectations that we had in immigrating to Canada, as well as the realities that we were met with when we arrived. We name what we gained through immigration as well as what we lost. And in doing so, we acknowledge and create space for grief to surface. This grief is not new, but often just hasn't felt the space or permission to make itself known. Instead, it shows up as fatigue, lack of motivation, anger, frustration, physical ailments, and/or mental illness. We have learned that creating the space for grief is an unlocking moment in the Stories of Us process. Unacknowledged and unexpressed grief can hold us back from imagining possible futures. How can we start to chart a possible future if the story of how we got here is unclear? While this workshop can and has been cathartic, it's also not the end-all be-all of the grieving process. Instead, our intention is to provide participants with the vocabulary, the space, and the community to sit with the conflicting feelings that come with grief. A container where participants can feel grateful for their safety while also feeling cheated by the illusion of the Canadian dream. Where they can feel thankful for the opportunity to start anew while experiencing deep, deep longing for the people and places they left behind. If I'm being completely honest, the shift that happens in Workshop 3 is more one that is felt rather than one that can be described in words. The following week, in Workshop 4, we shift into talking about our strengths. We intentionally start by talking about why this can be hard. This includes coming from cultures that equate talking about strengths with bragging. It includes comparing ourselves to others, or genuinely feeling like we're not good at anything in a sector that tells us that we are nothing without Canadian experience. Having this discussion about why talking about strengths can be hard with participants up front means that they have the vocabulary to name the resistance as it inevitably arises over the course of the workshop. I've also found it helpful to break skills into 3 categories: skills that come to us naturally, skills that we've identified and developed with practice, and skills that we've had to develop out of necessity due to life experiences or circumstances. We've found that people tend to focus the most on the skills that come to them naturally and discount the other 2. But in opening up that space, we're able to build a connection between skill development, choice, and agency. Skills aren't necessarily something that you have or don't have, but rather muscles that you can choose to work out as life circumstances and resources allow. My favorite response to date from this workshop is a participant who shared that a skill that she developed out of necessity was being able to make vast amounts of biryani from the time that she had to cater her son's full wedding. And that brings us to workshop 5, the one where we dare to talk about the F word, the future. Similar to the workshop on skills, we spend time at the start talking about why the prospect of imagining the future can be challenging. And when we create the space for it, it's not hard to see why we might find it harder to envision the future when the present is so uncertain, when you've already imagined your ideal future in a country that hasn't necessarily followed through on that promise. Once again, we've found that naming the resistance up front means that participants feel less shame, less guilt, and less frustration around it when it inevitably comes up. They know they're not alone, and they now have the vocabulary to name it. And because the future can feel so intangible and so far away, we guide them through an immersive meditation that guides participants on a journey to a day in their lives 5 years from now. We move slowly. We engage the senses. We focus on the details. We ask questions and extend invitations rather than issuing instructions. And we invite ourselves to be open to what emerges, even if it's surprising. And when we come out on the other end of the meditation, we offer space to process together and separately. We create space for what we saw and experienced in the meditation, but also how we felt about what we saw and we experienced. One of the most fascinating phenomena that has emerged in Workshop 5 is this pattern of people seeing futures in their meditation that are entirely different than the ones that they thought they wanted and were working toward. While their initial reaction to this is confusion, it's such a gift to be able to witness and hold people in moments of them engaging with their own internal experiences and desires with such curiosity and fascination. And in Workshop 6, we bring it all together. Prior to Workshop 6, we ask participants to complete a template that has a list of questions that we've pulled from the story prompts that they've answered in Workshops 1 through 5. The questions are ordered in a way that answering them in sequence yields naturally to a cohesive story. This is the moment when people realize that the entire workshop series has been intentionally designed in a way to help them unfold their story layer by layer, piece by piece. In this workshop, participants are offered a safe, non-judgmental space to share their story in full, as they've uncovered it over the previous 6 weeks. It's a moment of connecting the dots and being witnessed in doing so. And last but not least, this brings us to the 7th and final workshop of the series. This is the one where we celebrate. When we train facilitators on the Stories of Us workshop series, we make a point of stressing that this celebration is not optional. In a world where newcomers are constantly running from one milestone to the next in the pursuit of survival and in the dream of thriving, there is rarely any space or permission to pause, to reflect, to take stock, and appreciate how far they've come, how much they've accomplished despite the odds. In Workshop 7, we offer that space in the form of an Oscar ceremony. We roll out the metaphorical red carpet. We invite participants to wear something that holds meaning for them. We reminisce on the journey that they've taken. We announce their names with drum rolls and fanfare. We present their certificates, and we give them the floor to share their victory speeches. For me, the Oscar ceremony and the victory speeches in particular represent an organic and creative way to get feedback. In the speeches, participants share what the program meant to them, they name the shifts that they've experienced, and they share their wishes for both their future as well as the future of the program. For participants, the speech is a container for reflection and expression, and for us, it's an opportunity to understand what worked, why, and how we can continue to do better. And when the speeches are done, and the last words have been said, and everyone is holding on just for a few more minutes, we close with a ritual. This ritual varies from cohort to cohort and is often inspired by something that someone says during the celebration. It affirms, it grounds, and it makes letting go feel lighter rather than heavier. Because now you have your story to catch you when you fall.